All right, I hear a little echo. Jesse, is that at your end?
I think that's me. Sorry.
Okay.
And we are live.
We are live on YouTube. Oh my goodness.
Hi, YouTube.
All right. I think we're ready to start. Unless I hear any objections. And again, Justin, as I said to Monica, all of this is streaming live on YouTube. The raw, unedited content will be on YouTube. Yeah. But for the finished podcast, if I make a mistake, please correct me. If you want to take a second go at an answer or a comment, say the word, and we'll fix that in post-production.
Well, I'm a big fan of the YouTube platform, so this is really exciting to be on it. I gotta say, this is a dream come true. I've watched so much stuff on there, and it's a dream come true.
You're a pioneer. I was a guest on your YouTube channel January 6th, 2021.
That was Twitch.
That was Twitch, but didn't it?
You were even deeper into the massive takeover of media by the.
Well, you were a pioneer, man, in that regard. All right, well, we'll start the show now. If all are ready.
Yep. Okay.
Wait, I get a note here. I have a note here. Have Justin turn up volume a touch.
How about now? Sound good? You want me to sing?
Let's see.
Sing. You want me to do some
Jesse says
karaoke?
Yes. That sounds good.
Yeah.
We have 7 people watching so far, so that's good.
Whoa. Okay.
That's my family. It's my brothers and sisters.
All right.
They're 9 kids in my family, so it's got to be it's part of them.
All right. It's showtime. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. She's worked for Chicago's biggest newspapers, and he's worked for Chicago's most successful radio stations. And now they do email. Monica Eng is a longtime Chicago reporter who's covered food, culture, health, and the environment for the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Tribune, and yes, also at a radio station, WBEZ. Justin Kaufmann's a former talk show host and producer in Chicago at WBEZ and WGN Radio. They've teamed up to create the Axios Chicago newsletter, rounding up the day's biggest Chicago news, plus coverage of their passions, including food and sports. Coming to you despite a cough, congestion, and a mild fever that a test assures me do not signify COVID-19. I am a well-medicated Charlie Meyerson with Rivet 360 in Chicago Public Square, which, yes, is also an email newsletter. And this is Chicago Media Talks.
Hey, Charlie.
Hello, Monica. Hello, Justin.
Hello.
We're recording this via Zoom and broadcasting it live on YouTube, where you are welcome to enter your questions in the comment box, and we'll get to as many as time allows. Justin, what did you want to be when you grew up, and how did that lead you into Chicago radio?
You know, it's funny. My dad always reminds me that I was really into DePaul Blue Demon basketball when I was a kid, and I would write up stories, like sports stories of the games that they would show on Channel 9 at the time, or whatever they were showing, like when DePaul would play like Creighton or Georgetown. And I would write, he showed me when I was older, like these write-ups. So I think I wanted to be a sports writer in some form. But to be honest, I was a big, I really wanted to be in radio. I loved the idea. I had my own, I did the announcements in high school. I did a lot of things to end up where I ended up, to be a talk show host. So I think that's what I wanted to be.
High school announcements. You and I have that in common. Monica, What did you want to be when you grew up, and how has that shaped your career?
I had no idea, but by the time I was 15 and my mom was dating Roger Ebert, he said, "Hey, do one of your kids need a job this summer?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to be doing anything but watching TV, so maybe I'll go try this thing called being a copy clerk at the Chicago Sun-Times." And from the first day, I started working in the features department of the Chicago Sun-Times in 1985. I fell in love with it, and that's all I ever wanted to do, be a newspaper woman or a newswoman. I did not envision I would be an emailer. Thanks for calling me that.
It's an honorable profession. Yes, it's honorable.
There was no email at the time, which was why I had a job, putting the mail in the slots at the Chicago Sun-Times.
How and when did you two first meet?
Ooh. Oh, that's a good question. Monica was a world renowned, in Chicago media, and I think I booked her a couple times on talk shows on WBEZ. And then, when Monica was looking to make a career change, she came over to WBEZ. So we worked together at WBEZ for a couple of years, working on talk shows and reporting, probably in the early what do we call that decade? The 2010s. What do we call that?
Early
Do we have a name for that?
2000s.
Well, the
Aughts? Is that
the
what-
tens or the teens.
The
The
tens. That's good.
teens,
The
yeah.
tens,
Well, yeah, I remember I used to hear you on the radio, and I was always a huge fan of WBEZ. And then, you'd say, "Hey, can you come on and talk about your Tribune stories?" And I thought, "Oh, this is fun." So when you said, "Hey, there might be a spot here," it's like, you know what? I'm getting a little sick of the Tribune. Maybe I'll think about that. But as you recall, hiring in public radio sometimes takes a little time. So I think we were doing that dance for a couple of years.
Yeah, we had a lot of lunches at Fox and Nobel, which is
Yeah.
that high end grocery store over on by
Between the
Lady Pier.
Tribune
Yeah.
Tower and WBZ.
How did you come to be a team on the Axios Chicago newsletter?
Well, Justin had already been working with the Axios Daily podcast. So he kind of knew about that world. And we both had worked with Nyla Boodoo at WBZ, and she was already there. She was quite an evangelist for the place. And I thought, well, whatever, I've never really even heard of this thing. And so when she told us both about it, I think we were like, well, let's take a look at this. I don't think either of us were like super sure we wanted to do a newsletter, because obviously we had different skills. We didn't like, who has newsletter skills? I don't know. Do people like graduate college knowing how to do this?
Increasingly, yeah.
Yeah, I will say, Charlie, that the one thing that grabbed our attention, I think, looking at what Axios was doing with newsletters, not just in the local markets, but what they were doing with Mike Allen and others who do the national newsletters, is they really did feel like a written talk show. And if you look at Mike's AM, Axios AM, that's what it is. Mike is hosting a talk show. He's doing, instead he's doing articles instead of segments, but it really had this vibe, this energy to it. He's connecting to his readers. He's engaging. He's going back and forth. It reminded me a lot of what I was doing at WGN Radio, what I was doing at WBEZ with Reset. So it was an easy opportunity when they said they wanted to do that for Chicago. It was a no-brainer to say, okay, well, could you do a talk show in an email format? And that's what that's really our ethos, our mission statement, our philosophy, Monica and I, that this is a talk show in an email format, and it seems to be working.
In fact, when we are over length on these newsletters, Justin's like, "Oh, we got to cut it for time." I'm like, "Justin, we're not doing radio. You're cutting it for time anymore."
It's hard to lose the little radio things like cut for time.
Yeah.
Listeners, I always our readers are listeners, and I always say that.
It's easy to get those mixed up, and sharing some of that same professional DNA with you guys. I know that one of the hardest things I find in creating an email newsletter is deciding what not to put in, because as Monica has said, there's no time restriction, there's no length restriction, and deciding what doesn't go in is harder than deciding what does go in. How do you wrestle with that?
Well, we do have a length.
We have a length.
We nothing over 950 words. But that does make it harder. I mean, Chicago is full of, a million stories in the naked city. And so how do you choose, 4 or 5 a day? It's a terrible Sophie's choice to make.
Yeah,
as we record this, I'm sorry, go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just going to say that has been an issue where I think a lot of the editors and people are like, you're going to have to do this every day. You're going to watch out. Finding content will be an issue for Monica and I, because we've covered the city for years. And you know this, Charlie, read your newsletters, the same idea. You could do 50 stories. You could do 100 stories. I mean, it's just, time is nothing. So you're just like, yeah, everything. I every night at 10 o'clock at night after we put the thing to bed, I'm like, darn it, we didn't talk about this, or we didn't do this. And that reminds me of when I worked at BEZ and GN as well, where you would be down on yourself because you missed a topic that you think that Chicago wanted to talk about.
But there's always another day.
As we record this, August 22nd, 2022, you've been with Axios. Let me say that again. As we record this, August 22nd, 2022, you've been with Axios just a bit more than a year. What's been the high point of that year or so with Axios?
I have to say the high point for me, I mean, I love the company's great, and getting to know the reporters and writers that are in different newsletters in different markets has been unbelievable. It's like we had our first retreat back in the spring, and we went to Charlotte, and you got to meet these people that you've only seen in Zoom boxes. That was a huge thing. And then we went out in DC in May as well for an all staff. But I think to me, the highlight has been just connecting with Chicago readers. This is I would have never have thought this would be this successful. I mean, at the time we taped this, we're over 80,000 people who are signed up for it. The open rate is way above the average, and people are engaging and sending us emails on a daily basis on every story we do. It's way more than I ever had at WGN or WBEZ. I think that has much to do with the format. I mean, people are at their computers, are like, I can easily respond to this. But that has been the high point to me, is watching that sort of evolved engagement from some of the other things that were, I mean, Charlie, talk radio is all about engagement. It's all about getting people on the phone. Like, that's where it's supposed, you think that's ingrained in the secret sauce of an AM talk radio station like WGN, but this supersized it. And we're talking hundreds and hundreds of emails and people who want to engage.
Monica?
Which it can be overwhelming at times, because it's like, oh, I want to respond to all 150 people who wrote to us today with this sharing, where they like to go, for a picnic in Chicago, or, what they remember about, what were some of the things, memories of Tower Records. So yeah, similarly, I think, the engagement. I got COVID during our first, or before our first retreat, so I couldn't go, and Justin just loves to rub it in about how fun it was to go.
It was such a fun time without Monica.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that's the secret sauce, is that Monica wasn't there.
Leave that old wet blanket home.
All right. How about the low point of your first year with Axios, Monica?
Oh, jeepers. I mean, I wouldn't say low point, but, I think, breaking news, during the strike, during when Omicron was raging and the CPS and the CTU were fighting, we were doing really long days. And it was like, oh, shoot, something else just happened. Let's, break the thing open again. It's actually very exciting to cover breaking news, but it was wearing. And I think, and then the Highland Park thing, day after day, it turns into a manhunt. It turns into these things. And our bosses are actually great. They're like, look, are you guys feeling worn down? What can we do to kind of rejuvenate you?
I think, because we are news, media creatures at best and at heart, that it becomes really difficult to shut it off. And so, if there are breaking news stories on top of breaking news stories, we're not the type to bury our head in the sand. We're the type to say, it doesn't matter if it's 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock, we get up and we start working again. And that is, that's just part of the pitfalls of the job. I mean, that you get burnout, you don't get a chance to have any sort of renewal moment or, time to rest. You just got to keep going.
In a two-person newsroom, it can be rough.
Yeah. Just 6 years after its founding, Axios is being bought by Cox Enterprises, a cable communications and historically a newspaper company, for a little more than $500 million. What's that mean for you and Axios Chicago? Are you both millionaires now?
Well, I guess, quasi-millionaires, maybe like multi. It's actually, I've been, and Justin's been at companies that have been bought before, and it's usually bad news. It actually appears to be good news in this case. And our bosses, made sure that they got a really good deal for employees as well. As far as we can tell, they're not going to touch the journalism. They just actually want more local journalism. Cox seems to really love the local end of this. And so I think it means we get more love, and our bosses are talking about this as a multi-generational thing. They want Axios to be around generations after they're gone. And I think, as far as I can tell, that's really going to help with this.
When you say good deal, when you say good deal for employees, without asking for, what does that really mean?
We get to sell a third of our stock. So everyone is vested, even people who've been there a short time.
Okay.
And you can sell a third of your stock to Cox. And then later we can sell it for actually an even better deal, depending on the valuation of the company at the time.
Axios is a young company, and it is interesting to see the difference in philosophy and styles what a young company is bought as opposed to an older company. And I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I was there when WGN Radio was sold to Nexstar. Before that, tried to be sold to Sinclair. That is a different feeling. That's a feeling of dread, and they're coming in to change formats or cut, or like if you work at the newspapers. That's not what this is. This is a win for Axios. They got a media company to buy the product for a pretty sizable no amount of money, and they look at it as this is an indicator and also I would think a encouraging sign that people are interested in the future of local news.
How do you work together? What's your schedule like?
9:30 in the morning, we get on Zoom together and we say, what do you got? Oh, I got this. Oh, how about you? And then we say, okay, let's do it. And at 1:00 we turn in our newsletter.
Yeah,
Our
a little later
editor,
than that, a little later, 1:00. That's on a good day.
yeah, so maybe 2:00 our edit, we turn it in. Our editor reads it and we respond to the edits, put it in the CMS, and then we go play. But that's an ideal day.
For us, the fact that we're both steeped in talk show production, daily talk show news shows, like working on WBEZ and WGN, I have a grid with assignments that we both have, our complete autonomy over on what we want to write and when we want to write them. So we're already into September, way into September, about, big stories we want to take on, or dates that are coming up that are important, or regular segments that we need to bring back or are going to be on the board. So it's a lot like a talk show. If you're talking about what's going to be on WBEZ's Reset tomorrow, they already know, they still have to do the work. They still have to prep and get the guests and do that stuff, but they know what, is on the board. So it's the same idea. We usually do 5 to 6 what we call in the internal, they're called cards.
But there's
cards
stories
inside the newsletter, but they're stories or articles. And so we have 5 or 6 of those set, and we are flexible enough, Monica and I, to change those when there's breaking news or something that Chicago's talking about that's more, interesting than what we have. So that's how we kind of do it. Collectively,
between the two of you, you have, by my count, more than half a century of experience in newspapers and radio. And if you add me in, I think we can hit a century between the three of us. Does what's your take on this email news business? Is it a fad? Is it here for the long run? Is it really the successor in any way to traditional radio and television, or is it something that you expect is going to fade away as something else comes along?
Well, I will say this. I think that, obviously you've been a pioneer in doing email, and you've found your voice, and that's really what it's about. It's not that everybody can go to email and be like, all right, I'm just going to transfer my product to this new format and it's going to work. I mean, it's the same tenets are still involved. You have to have, you have to be engaging. You have to have personality. It's about the tone. Everything is the same. It's just you're using words. And I think it's very akin to maybe what we saw in the early 2000s with the blog movement. I think that was something that at first people are like, what? You're going to put this is in the newspaper. It's digital. What are we doing? And you saw some that became very successful and very profitable, and some that were middle of the road, and some that died off. And I think that newsletters, especially independent newsletters, are in the same ballpark. I think it's the same game. It's just evolved. And I think that advertisers are more akin to, or more, you're going to see them more interested in putting their money into email newsletters because it's been tried and true by now.
Yeah, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said, what the heck, email newsletters? I mean, actually, I'll be honest, at WBEZ, they kept saying, would you like to write our newsletter? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I am a reporter. Stop with the insulting questions. And now I'm like, I love it. And it really is meeting people where they are. People our age still open email. My daughter, she's like, can't you just text it to me, Mom? So maybe like these will be texted in the future, but it's respecting their time. It's curating for them. And it's going into the box that they open every morning.
I think it's all about advertising. And I think that the audience has been there. Charlie, we did it together at BEZ when you were, when I hired you.
Let's be transparent. You hired me to do WBEZs. Well, it wasn't email. WBEZ in 2013 was not set up, as I recall, to send email to readers. So I did what should have been email, but was just a blog at the time.
Yeah, but it was a news blog. It was similar in the way that what you do right now with Square. I mean, it was a very similar idea, but that is where you could see the evolution from those kind of posts that were important that people would go to the URL to check it out every morning to see what Charlie had to say about Chicago news. Now they've, just like podcasts, they figured out a way to take these blog posts and give them right to you in an email format. And that is that. I mean, if you really think about podcasts, that's where the world changed. When you were doing radio and it was appointment and I had to go to a dial, I had to actually punch the numbers in. Now they found technology that just puts it on my phone when I wake up. And that's a big difference. That's why you have, so much audience there, because they're not having to do anything. It's almost like, the media industry is finally figuring out you have to go where the audience is at, as opposed to trying to get them to come to you.
Yeah, the idea, a colleague in the broadcast business once talked about his organization's ability to train the listeners to do certain things at certain times. And that seems to be a notion that I think is going away. I don't even know when my favorite TV shows are on. They just show up on my TV when I want.
When you're ready to watch them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, I watched 2 or 3 TV shows over the weekend that were season finales from 2 weeks ago. And the idea being that I didn't have any problem with it. I knew how to avoid the spoilers. We're not living in this collective zeitgeist anymore where, everybody's watching one episode of Lost. There's a lot going on. And I feel like that is the same with, we talk about podcasts, you talk about newsletters, talking about news. And I think that what I find interesting is just the idea that, Monica and I we get this all the time from listeners or readers. Sorry, there you go. That say, I get all my stuff from you. Which is
scary. Come on, guys. You should read other stuff.
It is scary. You should read other stuff for sure. I mean, but I think it'd be the same with your readers, Charlie. I mean, they're coming to you. They can go get the stories from different places, but they're coming to you for that 3 to 5 minutes in the morning for them to say, this is what's going on. And this is what I need to know what's going on.
We read the news so you don't have to is one approach to email newsletters, I think. Reminder, we're recording this via Zoom and broadcasting it live on YouTube, where viewers are welcome to enter their questions in the comments box, and we'll get to as many as time allows. How has the pandemic played out for you as you create the Axios Chicago newsletter? Monica?
Well, we started it, like 1/3 or halfway into the pandemic. And so I'm thrilled to be at an organization that says we will be remote all the time. If you're in New York and you want to go to the New York office, or in Virginia and want to go there, that's great. But they say home is where your office is, and we get a nice fat stipend every month to make our home a nicer place. We can spend it on flowers or a dog or whatever.
A dog?
Yeah,
I'm impressed.
Anything that'll make your home a nicer place to do your job. And so it's been great. I mean, I have colleagues at WBC who have to go back to the office for a certain amount of days a week. And I don't envy them, because I love working at home. And I know it's not for everyone. For seniors like us who, don't have to learn from our colleagues, or of course I've got tons to learn, but I mean, for younger people for whom work is like the place where you're going to meet your mate and you can learn from older journalists, I could see how it's a problem. But we're old, we know it all.
You're both youngsters compared to me.
Yeah.
Justin, how does the pandemic play out for you?
Well, I mean, I left, I got, tossed out of WGN radio right when the pandemic started.
Yeah, I was on your last show.
Yeah, right. And that was right. I mean, that was right when the lockdown was happening, which is, the timing is crazy. But so I was one of the people who lost their job right when the pandemic started. And I have yet to, any project that I picked up freelance. I mean, I went on the host reset and I went into the Navy Pier studio to do that. But since then, I've done a number of projects, the Madigan podcast and the Axios newsletter, and working for Axios Today, which is the national podcast, from this desk. And, that has changed the world. The technology for us to be able to do this, the technology for us to be able to connect through Slack and other, opportunity or other platforms that give us an immediate connection is great. Now, I will say that what I miss is the creativity through collaboration, which was brought up in DC. I mean, when we went to the Axios retreat, they had an all-staff retreat in DC. That was a big thing that the CEOs and the founders talked about, is they said, we have to do more of these, because you do find yourself coming out of those, like, talking to the crew from Dallas or the crew from Tampa or the crew from Salt Lake City or Seattle and becoming friends and saying, we should do something, Detroit. Wouldn't we be like, all that kind of like conversation is amazing. It gets your creative juices flowing. And so that we miss for sure. And even Monica and I, who have a great shorthand, we don't see each other in person enough. Now, luckily we're on the same softball team, and that softball team is winning. It's a winning team, so we get
If
to
it
see
were
each other once a
losing,
week.
it would be sort of an angry confrontation.
All right. Well, that brings me to my next question, coincidentally, which is that your passions shine through in almost every issue. Monica, food, and Justin, sports. And Justin, we're in the thick of the season for your passion. And passion's putting it mildly because I've played against you. Chicago's Cup Media Softball League, named for Sun-Times columnist Irv Kupcinet. How's it going, Justin?
It is good. There are some really good teams this year in that league, and the league is great because, come on, it's a passion of mine because I love the sport, and I really start to learn the nuances and the history of 16-inch softball. The 16-inch softball Hall of Fame in Forest Park is a tremendous place to learn more about our forefathers and how they played softball and how softball is Chicago's sport. So it is really great to be out there, and like a night like tonight, we're going to play it tonight as we're taping this. We're going to play on a beautiful night at 75 degrees in a Chicago park on the west side. It doesn't get more Chicago than that. So like the connection to the city, and I think it's a very inclusive sport. I think that you see really strong African American leagues on the south side. You see really strong Latino leagues. You see suburban. A lot of car dealerships. You can't have a Chicago softball leagues without car dealerships. But I mean, everybody knows the game. Everybody's played it. Everybody's got a crooked finger. So I feel like it's an ultimate connector. That's why I love the sport.
Yeah, the fingers, I can identify with the fingers. That's why I'm not doing softball anymore. Monica, you're just back from your visit to the Illinois State Fair. As a food aficionado, how was it?
It's pretty disgusting. The highlight was the walking horseshoe, which is, as you know, is Texas toast covered in ground beef or other meat, and then fries, and then a bare cheese sauce. This one is where you throw all that in a tortilla, roll it up, deep fry it, and then put more cheese sauce on it. I feel like it's going to be a few years before I recover. But I have to say, I loved those tiny little fried donuts, those like tiny cinnamon donuts that are warm. You pop them in your mouth, and those are no good for you. But no, it was fun. But I think State Fair food is really an exercise in excess and fun for the time you go out there. But I'm paying my penance. I just went to Wrigley Field over the weekend to try their plant-based meats. So I got a really healthful giant helmet of nachos covered in cheese and sour cream, but then some plant-based chicken on top, and a kind of shriveled up hot dog that you will see a picture
that
of.
Definitely evens it out. That evens it
No,
out.
now I'm like virtuous. It's like a kale salad. So yeah, but it's fun, and I know that readers can vicariously enjoy these strange treats through me. So I'm happy to do it.
I will say
thank
this,
you
Charlie,
for your service. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Justin.
I just think that, even beyond food and sports, we both share a lot of passions, but we also have individual unique stuff. I mean, I'm big, I'm big into politics. Monica is big into public
health
policy
and
health and environment. You mentioned sports as a passion, but I also feel like sports is a huge part of this of the stew that is Chicago news. And a lot of places I've worked, BEZ is a great example of it. They ignore it, or they think that that's not important. And I think that that's wrong. And most of the readers that will write in are going to be sports fans in some form.
Yeah, every time I think, oh God, Justin's writing the sports story again, we get tons of response. And so I'm so glad we balance each other out on that, because he knows the world, and I just trust him from now on.
Yeah, and I mean, but that's the news. I mean, if you grew up in Chicago and Chicago, you know how important a Monday recap of the Bears game is.
I did grow up in Chicago, but I'm just like, I'm not interested. But that people will be.
They will be. But I think that's the thing. I think the combination of Monica's interests and mine together makes something that is very specific and unique to Chicago, that brings people around and wants to engage, because it's everything from arts, music, and it's different than a lot of the markets, Charlie. Like if you go to some of the other Axios locals, they're just straight up reporters. You're not going to get
some of them are former real estate reporters, so they love doing real estate stories. One of them is like a beer fanatic, and he does tons of beer stories. And Axios says, let your freak flag fly, man. You're into it. Our readers will understand your passion and get into it too.
And
it's a whole new world.
Yeah, and but you also know that like Chicago is a different place. I mean, we can compare ourselves to New York or LA, or compare ourselves to Wisconsin and Indiana. I mean, there's something about Chicago, and with this, it's cliche to say it's, big city, small town kind of thing, but it is going to be it should be a different newsletter than Denver. It should be a different newsletter than San Francisco. And that's what's great about it, is ours is very unique, very different than the others in the market. And theirs are great. I mean, I read them all. I love them. I love the local stuff.
Well, at some point we're not going to be able to. It's going to be
There's too many.
35 by the end of the year, and then maybe 100 by 2025.
Wow.
I know, it's great. It's great.
We have a question from one of our viewers on YouTube, Mike Decimos. From communications and other interactions you have with your readers, what seem to you to be their most serious areas of concern?
Concern like Chicago?
Yeah, what are they most
Violence.
worried about or interested in?
I think it's violence. I think whenever we get into political stuff, like Monica wrote a great piece about Bailey calling Chicago a hellhole again. And really the follow when she asked, at the fair, hey, what do you say to Chicagoans who live in that hellhole? He's like, I hear from them all the time.
He says he believes most of us think we're living in a hellhole.
And so that's the story. And so today has been really thoughtful. A lot of people who are like, mad at Darren Bailey, but then others who say, I don't agree with the word and he's not right, but there are some serious concerns in Chicago right now when it comes to violence and, crime, things like that need to be taken care of. So he's not wrong in saying that things are happening in Chicago that shouldn't be, but the way that he's using the words that he's choosing are too political, divisive, or just straight up wrong. So I think that's what we get mostly when we do police stories or we do violence stories, anything like that. You'll get responses that are much more divisive than you would think. Like it's not, we're not an echo chamber. A lot of times, you'll like your news accompanied with various string instruments, to like showing your liberal bias. Like this is great, that kind of thing. But I think the Axios reader is pretty balanced. We get a lot of Republican readers who get pissed at us or Democrat readers or liberal readers that get pissed at us when we don't go that way. So I think that's a good thing at the end of the day. But I think what you notice the most is people get upset about the mayor and where we are when it comes to crime.
Monica?
Yes. Well, the same. They say, oh, why don't you talk more about crime? And I say, we cover crime, but I don't think Chicago is defined by crime. We want to also remember why we love this city. And that's also what this newsletter is about. So we try to be balanced. One person said, you guys are sort of glass half full. I don't know, but I know that I would want to open up something that is glass half full and not just be bludgeoned by how horrible this place is every morning. I'm not sure I want to open up that email every morning.
Well, Charlie, I mean, you do your newsletter every morning. You could spend the first 15 links on crime stories. The 10 o'clock news loves it. Oh my God, from 10 to 10:15 is every carjacking that happened in the city.
Which is why our parents are all like, this city, how do you live in it? It's like, stop watching the news, Mom.
There has to be a study at some point. I'm sure we used to have think tanks that would do this, and maybe they still do, about the role the 10 o'clock news has played in how people see their city. Because it used to be 10 to 10:04. I'm an idiot savant when it comes to this stuff because I watch it and I mark where the stories are at. But it used to be maybe you'd get the first two stories that were violence. I'm seeing now like almost to through the first commercial break. And I feel like you could cherry pick a lot of that stuff because, it'll be carjacking here. Somebody got mugged over here, things like that. And, that is a big story in Chicago, but it's not the only story. And when you're talking about millions of people, I mean, 2.7 million in Chicago. And then you go outside of that to people like 9 million in the whole area. Of course, there's going to be crime. So, and I'm not saying that Chicago doesn't have a crime problem, that we talk about it all the time, but I think that it's a strange world we live in where the people who are charged with documenting what's happening in our city are spending a third of their time talking about crime.
I swear it's not a prerequisite for appearing on this show, but it happens that I've worked with both of our guests at different times in our careers, with Justin at WBEZ, with Monica at the Tribune. So this seems like as good a time as any to launch a feature that we may or may not edit out of the finished podcast. A little feature I call, How Did Charlie Most Annoy You? Monica, you first.
I was thinking long and hard about that, and you just didn't. You didn't annoy me.
No,
much
come
at
on.
all. You were just a delight.
Oh man.
But
Okay,
Justin
we're
might
editing
have
that. We're editing
something.
that out of the podcast
Yeah.
for sure. Justin,
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
sure I
okay.
annoyed you. How did I annoy you?
You didn't annoy me when you were. All I can think about. I'm trying to think about. You came in and you hosted for me too. You did a couple of shows, which was
You were
great.
desperate, as I recall.
No. That was fun. It was fun to have you. That didn't annoy me at all. It was a lot of fun. And then I don't know. I think where I get annoyed with you, and a very specific thing, is when you were a guest on my show and you would ask for more prep than needed. And so like, I'd be like, Charlie, come on GN on Friday. We'll talk about what happened in the news. And then it'd be like nonstop emails about like, what about this? What about that? What about, what do you want me to talk about? What about, I'm like, all right, okay, man. Like, I'm just going to wing it. Like I wanted to wing it. I'm on a 4-hour show with, I don't have a lot of time for prep and we're just going to wing it. And Charlie always wanted to over prep. That's all I remember about that. Not in an annoying way that I'm like, I'm mad at Charlie. I just always laughed. I'm like, I ain't got time.
Now that's a good answer. Monica, one more shot. Anything you want to land?
I really don't remember. Asked my partner Colin McMahon. He's like,
Oh, I'm sure I annoyed Colin.
he said, figure it out yourself, Monica. I said, I can't remember anything annoying.
You do play the flute, which is just
Well, yeah, but I've
overall
never
is pretty
played the-
annoying.
I have
Jethro
not played the
Tull
flute on
style?
your show. I have not played the flute on any of your broadcasts. So
Okay.
Did
I
you
don't
not?
think
I
that-
thought I had you do it one time on the phone.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I
what the-
did. Yeah, I
yeah,
guess
like
I
what-
did. Okay.
Like Anchorman.
Yeah, like that, only not as good.
Yeah.
All right. Closing thoughts. Justin.
You can't have a conversation about the future of this kind of work without pointing out what you've done for Chicago, and obviously the Chicago Public Square has been there and done a lot so far, and continues to lead. There wouldn't be an Axios newsletter or a Politico newsletter, any of the newsletters that came in, if there weren't independents that tried and showed that it was successful before.
Yeah, but I don't have 80,000 readers, so there's a big difference there. Thank you,
Yeah.
Justin. Closing thoughts, Monica.
Well, I'm just, glad that you saw fit to have us on. We type all day and we don't get to use our talking muscles that much. But thank you so much for doing it, and thanks for amplifying our stories sometimes. That really
Yeah.
helps, and I think it shows that a lot of people say, "Oh, Axios is trying to kill local journalism. It's going into these markets." And a certain leader of a certain large news organization in Chicago, said, "You'll never be us," and it's like, dude, or maybe it was a woman. We're not trying to be you. We're trying to be additive to the local news environment. And I think we can all support each other, because more information for Chicago is only good for Chicago.
Yeah, I don't know if you get anyone asking you about other email newsletters as if they're competition. Sounds like you do. But, every once in a while, someone will ask me. And I want to say publicly, the more email newsletters for and about Chicago, the better, especially if, as Axios Chicago does, it comes out before mine so that I can link to your work. Makes
There you
mine.
go.
Yeah, and we're the
all
same. I
better.
mean, when we talk to the people writing Chicago newsletters are great. I mean, you are great. I think Shia is awesome working at
Politico.
Hunter at WBEZ. The folks at the Sun-Times and the Tribune do great work. So I don't know if they, just because we're in it's so funny because for years we've all worked at different media outlets, and then we've changed where we work. So at a certain
And
point,
we're all
it just becomes-
friends. I don't
we're all
see us
friends
as
and personal. Yeah, exactly.
When I was at the state fair covering Pritzker, some of us couldn't get close to him, and so Amanda Vinicky was taking my phone and making it closer, and then I took the NPR person's mic and moved it closer. We're all just helping each other, and I think that's the spirit we should see it in.
Yeah, I agreed. Amen.
Except on the softball diamond. No,
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
no help on this.
Our guests on this edition of Chicago Media Talks, recorded August 22nd, 2022, have been Monica Eng and Justin Kaufmann, co-authors of the essential and free Axios Chicago email newsletter. You can reach them at monica.eng. I'm going to say that again. You can reach them at monica.eng, that's E-N-G, at axios.com, and justin.kaufmann, that's K-U-F-M-A-N-N, at axios.com. And you can join me for a roundup of the news weekday mornings at chicagopublicsquare.com. I'm Charlie Meyerson, for producers Jesse Batend and Cindy. Say that again. I'm Charlie Meyerson, for producers Jesse Batend and Cindy Palaskis, and everyone at Rivet 360. Thanks for listening to Chicago Media Talks. I think we can say that.
Great.
Okay, you know what? I totally forgot to press my record on here. I'm sorry.
I
Classic.
think we're probably okay.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm
it's
just gonna.
nice-
I'm not
it's
gonna
nice to
send
have-
it. It's 40 minutes long, so I'm not gonna